Today's reading is from Borges' personal anthology. This is Everything and Nothing. There was no one in him. Behind his face, even the poor paintings of the epoch show it to be unlike any other. And behind his words, which were copious, fantastic, and agitated, there was nothing but a bit of cold, a dream not dreamed by anyone. At first he thought that everyone was like himself, but the dismay shown by a comrade to whom he mentioned this vacuity revealed his error to him, and made him realize forever that an individual should not differ from the species. At one time it occurred to him that he might find a remedy for his difficulty in books, and so he learned the small Latin and less Greek, of which contemporaries spoke. Later, he considered he might find what he sought in carrying out one of the elemental rights of humanity, and so he let himself be initiated by Anne Hathaway in the long siesta hour of an afternoon in June. In his 20s, he went to London. Instinctively, he had already trained himself in the habit of pretending he was someone, so it should not be discovered that he was no one. In London he found the profession to which he had been predestined, that of an actor, someone who, on a stage, plays at being someone else, before a concourse of people who pretend to take him for that one. His histrionic work taught him a singular satisfaction, perhaps the first he had ever known. And yet, once the last line of verse had been acclaimed and the last dead man dragged off stage, he tasted the hateful taste of unreality. He would leave off being Ferrex or Tamburlaine and become no one again. Thus beset, he took to imagining other heroes and other tragic tales. And so, while his body complied with his bodily destiny in London bawdy houses and taverns, the soul inhabiting that body was Caesar unheeding the augur's warnings, and Juliet detesting the lark, and Macbeth talking on the heath with witches who are also the Fates. No one was ever so many men as that man. Like the Egyptian Proteus, he was able to exhaust all the appearances of being. From time to time he left, in some obscure corner of his work, a confession he was sure would never be deciphered. Richard states that in his one person he plays many parts, and Iago curiously says, "I am not what I am." The fundamental oneness of existing, dreaming, and acting inspired in him several famous passages. He persisted in this directed hallucination for 20 years, but one morning he was overcome by a surfeit and horror of being all those kings who die by the sword, and all those unfortunate lovers who converge, diverge, and melodiously expire. That same day he settled on the sale of his theatre. Before a week was out, he had gone back to his native village, where he recuperated the trees and the river of his boyhood, without relating them at all to the trees and rivers, illustrious with mythological allusion and Latin phrase, which his muse had celebrated. He had to be someone. He became a retired impresario who has made his fortune, and who was interested in making loans, in lawsuits, and in petty usury. It was in character, then, in this character, that he dictated the arid last will and testament we know, from which he deliberately excluded any note of pathos or trace of literature. Friends from London used to visit him in his retreat, and for them he would once more play the part of poet. History adds that before or after his death he found himself facing God and said, "I, who have been so many men in vain, want to become one man, myself alone." From out of a whirlwind the voice of God replied, "I am not either. I dreamed the world the way you dreamed your work, my Shakespeare. One of the forms of my dream was you, who, like me, are many and no one. Translated by Anthony Kerrigan.